We will be starting in just a second. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to get yourselves ready, get your cup of coffee. This is a 90-minute session. It's a highly interactive session. We've got a lot of people joining us, Zoom and on LinkedIn Live. So you should be seeing us at any moment on LinkedIn Live. Now, if you are joining us in Zoom, we will switch off the possibility for you to turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves. So you will be in listen-only mode if you are joining us on Zoom today. So feel free, you can be in your pajamas, you can be eating, you can be drinking your coffee. Nobody's going to be watching you. You will also have the possibility, if you're in the Zoom room, to interact directly with the host. So if you have any technical issues, you can be contacting Hannah, who is here in the background supporting us. And in just a second, we will be also live on LinkedIn. So if you're joining us from LinkedIn, welcome. I'm really excited to be speaking today on the topic of leading in a startup. We have some amazing guests who have a wealth of experience, everything startup related. So I think it's time that we should just jump right in. There's a couple of things I just want to share in terms of housekeeping. So as I mentioned already, we are doing this through Zoom and LinkedIn Live. This is a 90-minute event and you're in listen-only mode in Zoom, so you don't need your camera. Really important, we're going to be centralizing communication via Slido. Slido, I'm going to share with you a QR code in just a second, which is going to help you bring up, hold on one second, guys. Sorry. So on this QR code, you're going to be able to open up onto your phone or onto your laptop the screen, which will allow you to go and ask any questions you want to the audience. So I'm hopeful that everyone can see my QR code. I think you can. So on this QR code, you're going to be able to open up a page in Slido where you can ask any questions you want in the second half of the session. Now, what you'll see is that there were some people that already pre-registered questions. So if you're not sure what questions to ask and you're here just to listen in and see what the panel have to share, you can scout the questions that are already there and give them a thumbs up, upvote the questions that you really like the look of, in order to make sure that we are addressing the questions that most matter to you. So if you're in the Zoom room, you should be receiving a link in chat that you can open up also the Slido in your web browser if you don't want to be using it on your phone. Okay, so add your questions and upvote. It will be being recorded, so you will be able to access this on Elemed's website after the event. However, if you have questions to ask, you can only ask them in real time. So to get the real value from today's event and not to just watch it on demand, please stay as long as you can, ideally for the 90 minutes, so that we can make sure we're asking your questions around leading in a startup. We won't overrun, and I'm sorry that we were a few minutes late, but we will still finish on time today. And please keep an eye on your inbox to give us feedback and check out our follow-up emails afterwards. One of the really important feedbacks that we always ask is, like, have you got ideas for future topics? And actually the one about leading in a startup was something that came up time and time again, which is what inspired us to actually put on this episode today, specifically on leading in a startup. So let's first welcome our panel. So we should be bringing up our panel and spotlighting them on the screen in just a second. We have Faisal Jabrani, who is the VP of Global Quality Assurance at Median Technologies. We have Claude Henian, who is the CEO of Ondiag, Alex Zaretsky, Associate Head of AI at Notified Body BSI, and Ian Wilder, Head of Quality at SPT LabTech. Now, our panel are going to be giving more depth in terms of their experience in leadership in just a second. But before we do that, I just want to test that the Slido is working with everybody, considering we have had a couple of technical issues today. So please open up the Slido and let us know, where are you joining from? Where are you joining from? So I should be hopefully seeing, okay, great. It is working, guys. This is giving me confidence. So we've got people from Ireland. We've actually got someone joining us from San Jose in California. Wow. I hope that the weather in California is really, really nice, because here in the UK, it is raining and it is really dreary and it is not what we want for springtime. We've got people from Switzerland, the UK, Ireland, Brussels, bonjour. We've got Germany, guten Tag. Now I'm showing off all my language skills. So welcome everybody, welcome. And I'm really glad to see that the Slido is working. So you will see now in the Slido that we're going to have the questions there. And that's where you're going to have the chance in the Q&A section of Slido to actually upvote the questions that you like the look of. So I am now going to pass over to our wonderful panel to introduce themselves. Alex, why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Redsky, and I'm pleased to join the session. So I'm associate head, as Elena has mentioned, in BSI, AI Notified Body. Prior to join BSI, I had around 10 years of experience, and I'm with BSI for 5 years. I raised 3 medical startups, and 2 of them were acquired respectively in 2015 and 2019. All MedTech companies, AI and software as medical device. So, and I'm really excited to join our today panel session.
Thank you so much. Let's go next to Faisal Jabrani.
Hi everyone, my name is Faisal Jabrani. So I'm VP Global Quality Assurance at Median Technologies. So I'm working for 15 plus years in quality assurance in biotechnology, pharmaceutical veterinary company, and now medical devices. So I used to take opportunity to manage computerized system validation, but also good clinical practices and all validation of computerized system or medical product in GXP environment, going from preclinical to pharmacovigilance. So I'm glad to be a part of this panel to show you a little bit of my experience and to share with you any thought that you can have.
Thank you, Faisal. And let's go over as well now to Claude.
Hi, my name is Claude Aignan. I'm the CEO of OncoDiag. In the past, I managed various companies in the MedTech domain, a big human tissue bank, a company developing new drugs against cancer, and today I'm developing new non-invasive tests to check if you have any kind of cancer.
Thank you very much, Claude. And finally, welcome, Ian.
Hi, yes. So I've been in quality actually for over 30 years now. The first 10 years was actually spent in the steel industry in Sheffield. I've been in MedTech since 1999. I've worked for both large corporates and SMEs. I've probably done 15 years in startups and 10 years in larger corporations. So I've done IVDs, devices. I've worked in a couple of consultancies as well. So yeah, a fair range of experience, I hope.
So as you can see, we've got a wide-reaching panel, but really specific experience as well in working in a startup from all different perspectives, leading the function, wearing the hat of CEO. Now, I've got a question that I want to put first to all of you, and I'm interested in all of your opinions on this, which is, what is actually the biggest challenge of working in a startup? Alex, why don't you start?
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to start. And you know that the core difference for me when you're just working in a startup comparing to when you founded the startup, it's a huge gap of differences, because you need to take all of your risk with you. When you co-founding with someone, you also bring someone at the table with you to take all of the risks and share with them together. So I would say taking the risks, it's the biggest startup mentality. You need to combine bringing the future vision to the product market fit to land it with a reality and short-term visions. And of course, we all are working in the medical device industry, so which means that one of the important milestones is market clearance, for which without which we cannot do the product market fit. And with a startup mentality and a speed and agility, we need to make it fast, but don't jeopardize the long-term vision of the company.
Thank you, Alex. So yeah, definitely there's a risk element, of course, to working in a startup. Claude, you're on mute, Claude. Oh, one moment. Let's just unmute Claude.
Yes, that's okay. Yes, for me, the main element is to recruit people sharing the same passion as you, of discovery, developing new things, and to create something where you are the CEO, yes, but everybody can discuss, share their opinion, and then you just have to take the final decision. And this is the way that it can work. Everybody feels very secure inside the company and continue all together. You don't have to put forward your leadership very strongly. It has to be a very fair way to, it's a kind of general discussion all the time.
Yeah. And so Ian, what would you say then, coming at it from the functional perspective of leading in a startup?
I can put it very simply. You have to do a tremendous amount very quickly with very little.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, titles. Yeah, you know, you could be a director or whatever, but in a startup, titles are meaningless. You know, you've got a tremendous amount to do, and you know, I've worked in a couple of startups where you know they're literally a few days away from hitting the wall in terms of the finances. You know, so it's a hell of a rush, but yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's a theme that we're starting to hear more and more. You know, do more with less, as definitely a challenge. But in particular, we see it in startups. And Faisal, what do you see? What's the biggest challenge from your side? We're just going to make sure Faisal can unmute himself. We're gonna keep pushing forwards, and then hopefully we're gonna come back to this point with Faisal in just a second. I wanna move to the topic of speaking the CEO's language, because this is something that is very, very particular of working in a startup. In big corporate companies, you don't necessarily have access to the CEO, and actually the communication style is something that is really different in a startup. And so I really want to spend a little bit of time talking about your experiences there. How do you tailor your communication style when you're talking about risk or compliance with CEOs or non-technical executives? I'd like to hear first from the CEO's perspective, actually. Claude, what would you have to say to that question?
Oh, I think you must talk to them. Well, when you're in a startup, you know obviously everybody very well, and you exchange all the time with them. So they need not to be arrested by any kind of they don't have to see the leadership. They have to see that you are listening to them. They can speak, they can exchange, they can propose a maximum of things. You just have to decide, having heard what everybody has to say. This point is very important, so everybody feels comfortable, feel very well inside the company. They have their own place, and they know that they can ask or say anything without risking any kind of things. It's a kind of very small family. There is somebody that has to take the decision, but any decision can be taken after a discussion with this person. It's very a major point of quality of relationship.
So I really value that you're talking about it kind of being a family and open and everybody's voice being heard. However, I really want to spend a little make the point actually that sometimes CEOs, from what I've seen or what I've heard, CEOs don't necessarily make decisions based on only like being compliant, right? They speak a different language. There are different triggers. There are different things that they're interested in hearing about. And so as regulatory and quality professionals, it's about like framing the point that you're trying to make around compliance or the point you're trying to make around risk, and actually translating that into the language of the CEO or into something that is actually important for the CEO to hear. Alex, you've also worn the CEO hat, but you're also in the kind of QARA world. What can you share around adapting communication style?
Oh, that's a really great question. And I would say the founders and CEOs of the medical device companies, especially the startups, they like to bring the medical device or IVD to the market as fast as possible because they'd like to validate their hypothesis, the product market fit, how the long-term vision fits to the reality, what actually the internet users would like to see from their devices, etc. And basically, the bringing quality regulatory perspective to the reality of the business world, it's enabler for company to place their device on the market. So, and without this sort of the green light from quality and regulatory, you can just don't do anything else and you stacked. And in reality of the CEO, when you put this pretty much simple perspective that no clearance for the market, no product market fit, no users, no business at all. It started to be as transparent as clear for CEO, CDO, CEO of the company, you name it.
Exactly. So Ian, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, in my experience, certainly in the early stages, the CEO, his sole job is to bring cash into the business. So what I've typically seen is that the CEO is out on the road, total commitment to the roadshow. So they basically speak the language of money, and they're really what they need to do is convert to the investor. So the language that I've always found, it's try and keep it simple, try and keep it visual, and if you're putting the message across, make sure it's a message that the CEO can convey to investors. And the other thing, actually dealing with one of the companies, we actually locked moving towards into 1345. We actually locked that in as a part of the milestone and funding for the business. So there was actually 2 years where what I was doing and what a couple of other team members were doing actually paid the entire bonus for the company. So I think that's that's really important.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And actually understanding that like the CEO's focus is about bringing money into the business, and actually so therefore whatever it is that you're trying to put forward, framing it in a way that makes it interesting from the CEO's perspective. So when you're regulatory, it might be about compliance, but actually from the CEO's perspective, how can you link that to money, basically, being able to inject capital into the business or risk, and the impact of that on money as well. That's also important. Faisal, we haven't heard from you, but I think you don't have microphone problems anymore. So I want to see if you've got anything to add to that point.
Okay, like said by our CEO here, one of the most important things, yes, of course, is to understand that the CEO is also the first, the leader, and then the first recruiter. So it's very important to keep in mind that he has to do the right choice, not only for money, but also for the recruitment and the first people that they will hire in the company. It will show its skills and identify the contributors, the right contributors, to help to grow the business, because after each one will be responsible on his own party. But at the end, the success is less about luck and more about strategic choices. And these first choices of people joining the company is something who will build the rest of the strategy for the company and the right direction for the business to grow.
Exactly. And actually, as regulating quality professionals, the more you can understand about the business and how it all connects together, the more cohesive it is in a startup, because in a startup, those functional lines sometimes are a little bit blurred. As Ian said, titles don't really matter that much. If something needs to be done, and there's no one with a title that can do it, it's about rolling up your sleeves and actually, doing what you can to keep it all moving forwards. Right, guys, good news, everybody. We are live on LinkedIn. We have been live on LinkedIn for the last 10 minutes. But I do want to speak to everybody who's joining us on LinkedIn, because from the information that I've just had, we do have a few hundred people already listening in on LinkedIn. And you may have missed the beginning of the episode where I shared the QR code to be joining us on Slido. So I'm just going to take a quick break, especially for those of you who are joining us on LinkedIn, or for those of you you who may have joined a few minutes late, please scan this QR code. This QR code is going to take you to Slido. Slido is where you can pre-register any questions that you want us to ask. So we're having a general conversation now, but in the second half at 1:15, I'm going to dive into live Q&A, and those questions are going to be asked in the order of importance and popularity. So if you have a question to ask, please drop it in the Slido. You don't have to put your name, you can be anonymous. If you don't have any questions specifically to ask, have a look through the questions that are already there that other people have asked and give the thumbs up to the ones you like the look of. Then I'm going to be asking from the most popular down, the questions basically that have the most thumbs up on the Slido. So let's go back into the conversation because we still have so much to cover, and I want to make sure we get maximum value from all of our panelists. So my next question is, what is the one thing leaders need to have in order to be successful when working in a startup? So Ian, what would you say?
God, one thing. There's actually one thing I always say that people need, certainly in quality and regulatory, and that is resilience and stamina, because it's an incredibly challenging job. I can give you one particular example. At a previous company, the company had the CEO, he swore blind to this particular this diagnostic, and he wouldn't let go of it. And he actually tasked me with actually bringing it on board. And I got to a point where I'd worked through the immediate option at the business we were working within. We'd gone to another laboratory close to where the business was. They'd said no. And then eventually we thought we'd lined up with somebody. And I remember I was stood in Shenzhen in the airport, and they rang up and said, "Oh, we're not doing it." So it's like 6 months of work had just completely been wiped off. So we had to start again. You know, we actually did find somewhere eventually, and ironically, who we ended up partnering with, the company ended up buying them. So yeah, but certainly stamina and resilience. You've got to keep going even when even when you feel like you just want to quit.
Definitely. That's definitely one of the key things that you need to have when you're working in a startup, that resilience. Claude, what would you say?
Well, another point is to be able to transform science and technology you develop into things that investor can understand. Everybody must understand, and this is one of the major difficulty. Your CSO is able to explain very sophisticated things, and nobody is following that. So I must find a way to that all the people in the room understand what we are doing. It's quite obvious when you talk about cancer that everybody is very attentive. They want to understand what we do. So we need just to explain. We don't need to enter into sophisticated molecular biology, but what will it bring to people? What will be the service? What will be the drug? What will be the system you develop in very simple words? And that's one of the things that allows to raise funds.
And so basically, you know, almost like communication, being able to communicate ideas really simply.
Yes.
And actually, that is one of the hardest things when it comes to communication. Can you take a really complicated concept and explain it to a 5-year-old? And if you can explain it so that a 5-year-old understands it, you're doing really, really well. And that's a really, really good exercise sometimes when you're doing something that's super technical and you actually want to simplify it. And also that's a good tip for speaking to leadership as well, right? So as technical professionals, even if you're not necessarily talking to investors, but speaking to non-technical professionals, can you take that concept that you're trying to explain about compliance or risk or requirements or market entry and actually make it easy to understand as if you would to a 5-year-old? So I have another question for Alex and Faisal now. So we're gonna go a little bit deeper on the business enabler idea, because the idea of Q&R as like a business enabling function has gained popularity over the last few years. But my question is, what does good leadership look like in a function that's often seen as a blocker. So what do you actually need to do in order to be perceived as a business enabler in a startup? Alex?
Yeah, that's really a great question, and we often hear that the quality and regulatory is the blocker to enter the market. We need to admit for the startups it is the blocker, but if you look at from another one angle, you would see that basically that's the way how you can quickly do the product market fit validation without actually bringing the actual device to the end users, and you can run the simulation, the questionnaires, etc. So if we're speaking about the quality regulatory leadership, I believe that the main core function to understand the business requirements, what the long-term vision is, break it down to the short-term vision, and make sure that you can achieve the goal of placing the product on the market with optimized resources, and by resources we mean time, money, people, tools. So and on this one, I believe that Faisal, with his experience and background, can add much more details.
I totally agree with what you say, Alex. So yes, I think that the first thing that we have to keep in mind, and is valuable for all the position in quality and RA, is to remain that we are a partner. So we are not only an enabler, but we are also a business partner. And our function is called a support function in companies. So it means we have to work closely with business and to understand their requests and expectation, and also to share with them that we work with the same goal, to satisfy the patients or the customer if you have another product. So what is important by working with a business is by building this partnership, is to manage with them the risk of non-compliance. Because at the end, as you said, we need to have a product approved and marked, and to be able to sell it to support life of patients. So the goal of this is to identify the risks that we can have in terms of compliance, but also to improve the business operations, because one of the main activity also of the quality assurance is to put in place an improvement plan and a way to improve the processes in the company. And this can be done only if we work closely with business operations, and to identify either what they are requesting or what we are supposed to implement also in terms of regulatory framework.
Faisal, you said manage the risk of non-compliance.
Yes.
Can you be a little bit more depth on what does that actually mean?
It means that usually when you work in operation, you have one target who is release the product. So whatever the way, at the end, we have some quality controls to identify that the products meet expectations, but not necessarily all the processes that you have to put in place and how to put them in place. The regulatory framework that we have around, and then to maintain the compliance, is to ensure that what is expected from the regulation is applied during all the business process, and to, at the end, ensure that it's done automatically or on a daily basis, to not have to think at it, but more to implement it, I would say, automatically. And this part of risk that we have to identify with the business partner with the critical steps, and after to put in place some actions or SOPs or documentation or any other process to control that. It can be done only if we know the process, and the best person who knows what is done every day is the business operation.
Thank you. So the next thing I want to kind of broach is this kind of not conflict, but this tension between hitting milestones and being compliant, and iterating your product fast. So what we've seen is that development cycles are different. If you're in a startup, in particular a tech startup, they have a different way of developing products. And now we're starting to see, as tech creeps into the MedTech world, medical device we're starting to see development cycles are actually different. They're much more agile. And that is different when you compare it to the traditional way medical devices are actually developed and those development cycles. So my question is, how do you prioritize between regulatory milestones and doing fast product iterations? Ian, have you got any answers for me?
Yeah, I've worked in a couple of companies in the past. There was one in particular. It was principally a software app, and the speed at which they worked was just unbelievable. I mean, I'd say a significant proportion of the company they were software developers. So you can't stop them doing what they do, and they're going to use Jira. And the thing you have to do is you have to create bookends. So you have to create a specification that they're going to work to. They will then go into agile methodology during the design development process. And then there's going to be a point at which they come out that they need to freeze the design and start testing it. As long as you make it very, very clear what those boundaries are and what the expectation is when they come out of it, in terms of not doing project scope creep and adding this and that in, which could potentially go back and and invalidate the verification test that you've done. As long as you make that clear, then you can actually they can sit quite well. And there's actually FDA actually did create a TIR for actually merging agile into regulatory methodology, so it can be done.
Does it require a different type of regulatory person to support it, or is this a switch that, or is this something that any Q&R person can learn?
I think what's important is to lay down what the red lines are, but you've got to the point that's been made by a few people, a couple of guys on here. In terms of being business partners, that is an element of being a business partner. It's not just not ruining the innovation, but just understanding that there comes a point at which you have to stop designing and start testing. And I always remind engineers there's always a version 2.
Yes, as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I will add also that for software engineering part or any developers, as you said, they used to implement software development lifecycle systems, agile methodology, and these are all based also on standards. So usually they have best practices, and then they are used to perform these different phases and keeping the records. The goal here, maybe for the quality assurance, is also to add some tips or some topics which are more, let's say, globally from regulatory perspective. I mean, to provide inputs and requirements and to participate on each step, or to view the global processes, to define the processes with them. And this way, without being too technical, you are able to identify that the process is defined and implemented, and after is very experienced, that you will increase the level of details of your review, and then implement more specifically compliance. As you said, you have multiple versions, but not only a version of product, but also a version of processes. And this way, you can improve either both processes and product in the same roadmap.
So it's about kind of setting the boundaries, and then knowing what kind of good enough looks like, and expecting that and explaining that we're not looking for perfection. There will always be a second version, and we can always make improvements after, but actually here's the box that you can play in.
I think one other thing that's also really important, and I try and stress this to the design guys, is always to make sure you understand exactly what the mandatory requirements are coming into a design, because in a lot of cases not everything is going to be mandatory, and in some cases, if you're not careful, you tie yourself up in knots trying to achieve things that simply aren't achievable. So you've got to be, I think, going in as a first iteration, you've got to be realistic about what you're going to be able to achieve.
So I want to talk about risk, because that was something that came up earlier on. And obviously when you're leading a function in a startup, especially a function like quality and regulatory, you're always talking about risk, right? I mean, there's always that element of risk that we're analyzing. So have you ever been in a situation where you've literally had to make a decision where it's been a short-term risk and it has worked out, or you've taken a risk and it hasn't worked out? I'm interested to know your story stories. Has anyone got a story to tell me?
I have an example, which is, you know, for the word quality has a very different meaning for a scientist and somebody in the regulatory system. So what the guys have developed completely a new system, a new product. He thinks the quality comes from the development he made, and he doesn't want to write a lot of documents which are necessary to be able to prove and to have a CE mark or something like that. So there is a very big difficulty to. He admits that the product needs also everything that allows to have it certified, and so we will be able to sell it. And so many difficulty at the beginning for the first time when a developer realizes that he has to write that helped by somebody in the regulatory domain, that sometimes he escaped from the meeting and so on. So he said, no, you should be there because it's your product that we need to certify. It's not to the regulatory guy. He cannot write everything by itself generally. It's not a generality. And I had a very strong difficulty in a case with a clever guy that was doing his job very well, but could not write a word about how it has been conceived, how it works, how and so on. Well, that's normal, but you need to make that very strongly and quietly. So slowly you accept that that's reality. That's the real world in which we live. We need to make things in the quality with the meaning of the regulatory system and not only the quality of this product.
Yeah, I will add for this part, for this example that you gave us, which is quite nice, Claude, thank you. It's not only a question of quality in this part, but also a question of reproducibility. I mean, to do it again, to repeat the operations, and also for the company perspective is also one of the key elements to ensure that we will be able to do another product with the same condition and to be able to have something more stable. In terms of documentation, I would say that in quality and risk, to let you know, Elena, to give you an example also, it's more to have processes defined, which is quite standard. And usually in regulatory, we have multiple steps that we have to follow on specific order. And the main risk that we can have is to win time, to try to mix some steps or to reduce the steps, because the risk in terms of timing, of timelines is, let's say, higher than in terms of documentation. In this case, you will have some issue if you have any trouble during the process. I mean, when you have steps, you have to implement a plan, to apply the plan, to have the report. It's quite easy if you detect any issue to a new version and to update your processes. When you start to improve your processes in the same time that you are building it, the difficulty will be, when you have any issue, is to do it chronologically and to explain the choices that you made that you felt because you had an issue, and after to provide some clear explanation to the regulatories or notified bodies. Because at the end, as you said, Claude, you have to explain the story that you made your product to the authority. And then the easiest way you can explain it, the less question you will have behind that. So in terms of risk and compliance, it will be on that. The more difficulty you will have to explain it to be clear, as we said in the beginning of the meeting, to explain to all the people, financial, external, medical, to appropriate the wording. Then at the end, it will raise some difficulties for you to present your product.
I completely agree with you.
I'd like to turn it on its head, actually, a little bit, because a lot of my experience has been short-term gain, long-term risk. because definitely when you're driving towards milestones, the runway quite often very, very short. There was one situation where one of my previous companies, they were driving for sales, so they needed to show revenue. So their only criterion was actually picking countries that spoke French. And we had a situation where we actually signed up a contract with a distributor in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I remember I sat there one day with these colleagues, and we actually had a map from the Foreign Office, because it was war zones, and we were trying to work out whether or not it was even possible to service this contract on the basis that we actually might be deliberately sending an employee into a war zone. And we just turned around and said, this is insane. And we just stopped. We said, we cannot service this. But it was immediate revenue, but there was no real there was no real thought as to how they were actually going to service this contract in the longer run. So
wow, okay. That's a really good story. And I think that leads on to like another point that I want to talk about, which is around uncertainty. So oftentimes when you're in a startup, it is quite short-sighted in the sense of like it's that next milestone, that next thing that we're shooting for, and then we're pushing to go as quickly as we can to actually achieve it. Whereas what you might find is in bigger companies, there's like a much longer vision that they talk about. And oftentimes as well in startups, I might be speaking to leaders that might be talking to me about, burn rate and, currently they're employed and they're working, but the CEO's out there fundraising. And if they don't secure the fundraising, who knows what's going to happen? But if they do, that's going to unlock that next step. And so obviously in your functions, you're not somebody going out there and fundraising, right? So how do you actually lead? How do you lead a team in the face of such uncertainty? How do you stay motivated in the face of uncertainty? These are the questions that I would really love your advice on. Alex, what would you say?
Yes, and Elena, that's really great question. I believe in when you're not leading the company, but you are in a supportive function, it makes sense that as a leader, you make sure that you have the clear goals and the vision for your department, for your team, aligned, as Faisal has mentioned, with business priorities as well. So in that case, first of all, you make sure that it's one direction of the company, and as a support function, you are supporting the bigger vision. The second one, you make sure by the example that quality and regulatory sometimes it's has a boring reputation, if you'd like. So, and to do the boring stuff on a daily basis, it requires a lot of stamina from everyone. And as a leader, you just need to show by the example that it should be done on a daily basis. And when your team look at you, they see that, okay, that if he or she is doing this, that means that we can do it as well. And you support the team as well, that folks, we can do this. And when you're aligning the team efforts, when you align the priorities of quality and regulatory with the business world, it helps you to move as one entire ecosystem of the company, and you're not feeling yourself as a new kid in a block with boring functions and blocker to go to the new market.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's just about setting the standard and creating that continuity.
Just doing it every day. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does anyone else?
Yeah, I will say that the chance that we have in quality and regulatory affairs is that we have some routine tasks, as you said, Alex, and then we have a plan and anything identified during the year, which are quite standard. I will say internal audit, sub-sponsor audit, some KPI to monitor during the year. So this is something that we can define on a regular basis, and then it's something that's easy to manage. Maybe the difficulty in our case is more in terms of motivation, in terms of project for improvements. So once you have uncertainty, you know that you have your daily work, so this is done. But after, if you want to have a little bit challenges and improve the way that we are working and then manage some new project, this particular case can raise some doubt in the team. And then we have to find first as quality is also improving activity, but we cannot be perfect. And then it's step by step that we will improve our system, is to find some goals at our level and to define these goals with the team. And then by add them in the decision of the goals and identifying the goals, they can also help them to participate more in the objectives and to have, let's say, a vision at least for the year or the couple of years that will remain them a little bit more confident in the company until we have a good decision or good communication from the top management for the next months.
Thank you, Faisal. So I can't believe how fast the time is flying in this chat today. It's time to go into the live Q&A. I'm going to let you all have a sip of water and just gather yourselves, because now we're going to be going into live questions. So I'm going to be going into Slido and I'm going to be reading out the most popular questions first. Now, for those of you that may have joined us a little bit late, I'm bringing up a QR code on my screen that you can scan, and it's going to take you into Slido. What you will see in Slido is that there already are a bunch of questions that actually were pre-registered, and we have questions around leadership, around startup decision-making, business. So I'm going to be reading out the most popular questions first. If you have a question to ask that we haven't covered off already, please add it into the Slido. You can add it anonymously, so you don't even need to put your name. I'm just going to read it out. But if you don't know or you don't have a specific question to ask, have a look at the 17 questions that are already here in the chat and just give a thumbs up to the ones you like the sound of. I'm going to be asking the most popular questions first. And I know that working in a startup to corporate, making that move, I know this is something that people really think about, because these are often the conversations that I have with people when they're thinking about making career moves. Should I go to a startup or should I stay in a big company? What are the real differences? What do I need to be careful of? Like, what should I be looking for? What are the red flags? I know these are topics that are really important for people, especially when they're considering their career. Here we have 4 people that have spent their careers working in startups and larger companies, but they can really talk to you about what it is on the ground and what it actually feels like day to day. So do not miss this opportunity to ask them questions. So, guys, are you ready? Yes. Let's go. Okay, so the first question is, what kind of leadership does a startup not need? What kind of leadership does a startup not need? Now, the questions are also going to be coming in the Zoom chat, so you can read them on your screens. And then if you can answer it, please volunteer yourself. What kind of leadership does a startup not need?
Yeah, if you like, I can just start. It's a really great question. I had an example with one of my co-founders in my second startup, and initially we started the company with a guy who was much older than me, huge academic background, etc. And I've noticed that at the beginning, he started to bring this authority. So I had a huge set of the published white papers, the huge Hirsch index, etc. And then I started to see that I'm losing the momentum with my software developers, because when you're building the startup, you'd like to make sure that on a cultural level, the leadership is not based upon the authority. The leadership is based upon the exchange of the opinions, and you respect everyone's opinion, because you'd like to bring at the early phase of the startup as much diverse background, as much diverse opinion as you can. So you can just for when you'd like to tackle a new problem, you'd like to boil it within this category of the bunch of the opinions and bring the new fresh ideas. And you don't want to bring someone with a mentality, I'm the boss and that's what you will do because I said so.
Completely agree.
I think
Really nice.
Somebody that's not a team leader as well, a team player, sorry.
Yeah,
Which
yeah,
is
exactly.
very much linked to what you were saying. You know, they've got to really be a team player, because when you, as I said before, you know, there's no the titles are meaningless. People are going to have to roll the sleeves up and just plow in. And if somebody, I've seen this in a few, the previous companies where people have come from a big corporate environment and they have this vision that they want to make a difference, and they think that they can come into a startup and it's what they suddenly realize is that there's kind of nowhere to hide. And if you can't take the heat, as it were, then I've seen people struggle in that transition.
You make a really, really good point about visibility, and like from what I've seen as well in the market and the moves that people have made, if you want the opportunity to be visible, go and work in a startup. But understand that comes with like true visibility, as Ian said, like there is nowhere to hide. And so if you are a senior level executive working in a big corporate organization that has lots and lots of layers, and you have a very, very big support system behind you, and there's a department for IT and there's a department for this and there's somebody else who does all of these things, know that when you go and work in a startup, like it doesn't have that kind of infrastructure, and oftentimes you are the one having to just figure stuff out. And so if you're happy with that kind of visibility and that kind of rolling up your sleeves, it's a great opportunity.
You might make a decision, it might be wrong, but I think the worst thing in a startup is making no decision, because at the end of the day, you make a decision, you learn fast, you fail fast, you iterate. The worst thing is to do nothing.
Yeah. Why is it the worst thing? I'm following you, but just for those who might not be following, why do you say it's the worst thing?
Because at the end of the day, if you're working to very, very tight timelines, you're going to be charging towards your next funding round, as an example. And if you don't make the decisions to move forward because you're scared of doing something wrong, you're just going to miss the timelines. You're going to miss the deadlines. You're going to miss the milestones. And you could almost cease to exist as a company if you're not careful.
Yeah.
Yes, you will also confuse your team and go back to the uncertainty, and then people do not know where they are going through, what they have to work on. The responsibilities are not clearly defined, so you have some internal discussion, and as a leader you have to decide to be confident on the decision. So it's based on the technical support that you can have from your team, and after to support your team to identify any issue or misunderstanding between co-workers to ensure that everybody is on the same page, and then targeting the same goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you.
You must give all maximum of responsibilities to all the team. So you're not above everything. You just have to take the good decision when it's necessary. But the rest, when you are in this kind of group, they know that they can express and act as a responsible person, and they will learn also how to work together this way.
Thank you.
So you have more responsibility in a startup than in a big company.
Yeah, you definitely do. Right, so next question. Do's and don'ts for an early stage medical device startup CEO, both in general and specifically regarding RA and QA establishment. So let's break that up because it's quite a big question. So what are the do's and don'ts for an early stage medical device startup CEO? So this is basically advice for the CEO from the perspective of Q&R, I think is the question. It's going to come in the chat now as well. So do's and don'ts for an early stage medical device startup CEO, both in general and specifically regarding RA and QA. Who can take that one? Do's and don'ts.
If you'd like, I can just start on my own experience and my own mistakes. I believe that the most painful don't that I would advise not to do is about to spend a lot of money, time, and people efforts to bring the device on the market until you do the product market fit. It's because for medical devices, comparing to the my whole experience was software as medical device, mostly an AI as medical device, and in other type of industries, you can just quickly deploy your software in production, and you're good to go. In medical device industry, you need to go through all the regulatory checkups, depends on the geographical markets, etc. And it's shift of the mentality, and when you're still on the mentality, and I'm speaking now from software development, ML development guys, when you put there much more efforts and money and resources than needed to bring your device on the market on the early stage, when you don't have the clear vision that, okay, the product fit to the market, and I do have the pipelines of users who are waiting my product on the market, then you can run out of your momentum with your investors, etc. From quality and regulatory perspective, I mean, it's basically linked to the business perspective and quality and regulatory. That's would be my huge advice. What you don't want to do.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, of course. I will add for quality and regulatory. What is important to do, and I experienced it when I changed multiple companies from medical device, pharmaceutical companies, biotechnology companies. The first thing to do, I think, is to understand what is done and why it is done this way. So one of the first things that we used to do when you are in quality and you join a company, and you have to don't do in the beginning, is to come with all your knowledge and try to implement it in the organization, whatever it works. So the first thing is to understand how they are working, if they documented, as you mentioned, Claude, the practices, how they build some products or not, why they do the activities this way and not this way, why it is quality control and not this one. Just to have a clear view of the historical of the company. Once you know how it works, then you can try to work with them, and to by question and by understanding the processes, you can start to exchange and implement new things, short, I would say small pieces of modification, etc. If you come with your list of procedures and you say, okay, now we will work this way, this way, this way, and you put all the quality management system in the big company for a startup, for example, it will kill it, because you don't have the same amount of money behind that. You don't have the same tools, etc. So you have to adjust the level of compliance to the company. This was the part of the thing that I will said in the beginning, was I was muted, is to find the right balance between compliance and production, to ensure that the company is available, has the possibility to share a product fast and quickly on the market, but to remain compliant and to be sure that it will be approved for sale.
Thanks, Faisal. Yeah, that's a very good point as well. Obviously, you know, you can't. What's the saying with the sledgehammer to hit a nail? You don't need is it that you don't need a sledgehammer to hit a nail or something like that? But basically, yeah, you don't need something so heavy for something so small.
Yes, okay.
Okay, and does anyone else, so Ian, do you have any advice maybe from the perspective of if somebody's going to, if a Q&R professional going to join into a startup, what advice would you give them?
I think just be sure that they know what they're getting into. As I said, it's a tremendous learning experience, and you know, I've gained immeasurable experience doing a myriad of different things, way beyond the spectrum of a QARA working in small companies. And it's tremendous experience, and it will stretch you in ways that you probably you've never even thought of. But it is a very different mentality to being in a large corporate. And if you're looking for structure, if you're looking to be able to step in and necessarily have a process that's laid out that you can just follow, you will struggle. Definitely, because you may well be the one that's got to create that structure. So yeah.
So that brings us on to the next question, which is sort of similar to one of the questions we already asked in the past, but it is very popular. So I would like to revisit it in case there's anything else to unpack, which is how do you keep your team motivated during constant regulatory hurdles or changing business priorities? So we did already touch on this earlier on in the discussion, but I wanted to see if anyone has anything else that they want to add around helping to keep the team motivated around constant regulatory hurdles or changing business priorities.
Or change. Yeah.
No, first, please.
If you have constant modification, but in terms of regulation, the constant change is not so often. So you have multiple consultation first, draft version, time for implementation, etc. So to help the team is one of the things could be for them to maintain their regulatory watch. So to support them to participate to other group of discussion between professionals, exchange with other quality assurance person of other companies. So participate to some association this way. In terms of businesses is to implement an agile methodology, but it's more in terms of processes. I mean, identify the way to implement any product, and then by defining the processes, it can help your company and your colleagues to switch from a topic to another, and then to maintain the agility and to not be, I would say, to feel that they are they have overload or this kind of things, to be surprised and to have some stress because we are changing some direction. By defining processes, it will help them to assume more the changes and to not be too much stressed by that. And then it facilitates them to implement the new activities. And it's also for them a good opportunity it's a challenge for them also to learn and to have more experience by leading some projects than another. It could be a good way to help your team to continue to learn in their daily work by changing of processes or dispatching processes between your colleagues and members of your team.
Thank you, Faisal. Alex, did you have something to add to this one?
Yes, and Elena, as you mentioned, and as Faisal has mentioned before, basically regarding the constant regulatory updates, the frequency of changing is not so drastically high, and regarding the business priorities changing, I believe that's the fundamental part why people are joining the startup and not the corporate, because they'd like to work in a quick changing environment. And from my own experience, it helped me a lot to just embrace the fact, yes, we are working in a startup. Yes, we do have the changing priorities, not of course on a weekly basis, but sometimes on monthly or on a quarterly. And that's our difference comparing to the corporate. And you just need to embrace this fact and sometimes to celebrate the small wins on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, to celebrate your team and their efforts and what they've done before, so they can have this baggage of and a luggage of really nice emotions to go and keep the momentum to the complete the next challenge, if you'd like.
So going to the next step and the next step.
Yeah.
The other thing as well is regular communication.
Yeah.
And just talking to your team regularly. And at the end of the day, the one thing you don't want to do is, if they've got any concerns or doubts, you don't want them to fester, because in a small team, the team dynamics are everything. And if you get somebody that's poisoning the well a little bit because they're worried about stuff, that can have a really big impact. So, talking to them regularly and just making sure that if they've got any concerns, they feel they're perfectly comfortable to come and talk to you about it, and and address those concerns. That's really important.
Yeah, that's so important, especially as you said, like in a small company, every single person that you add to that team, every single person you add changes the dynamic. And if you have one person that is not on board or is just going in a different direction, that can dramatically undermine a lot of the work that you're doing in terms of like trying to build that culture. So it is really, really important to have that regular communication and to just keep people in the loop of where you're going. So there's another really interesting question that's come up, but before we go to it, I'm going to just share my screen and bring up the Slido again. So to those of you that are joining us on LinkedIn, or if you're in the Zoom chat and you're not already on Slido, if you scan this QR code, or if you're in the Zoom chat, we'll drop it in as a URL as well into the chat, so you can open it on your desktop if you're joining us on your desktop. It will bring up a list of questions. We have a number of questions in here, and I need your help by upvoting the questions that you like the most, so that we can ask the questions that mean the most to you. And if there's a question that's in there that actually hasn't been asked, upvote it. But if you've got a new question that also you're thinking, Eleanor, why haven't you asked this question? I really want to know the answer to it. Please put it in the chat, in the Slido Q&A, because probably there's other people that are listening that also have that same question, and I want to get to that question and make sure we're asking it to our esteemed panel. So please open your Slidos and interact with us there. So let's go back to the questions that we have here. And so the next question is, how can RAQA leaders frame their input to better influence strategic decisions? How can our RAQA leaders frame their input to better influence strategic decisions? I'm going to ask for one person to answer this, because I want to move a little bit faster through some more questions, because we do have quite a lot. So who's going to be the lucky person that wants to answer about how can RAQA leaders frame their input to better influence strategic decisions?
I can take it if you want.
Okay.
I will for this time. I will use the regulatory context also. So if you want to drive any decision or any strategic decision in the company, you have to identify, with the support of the business team and the sales team, what is expected from the customer, and what is the regulation or the country in which you want to sell your product. So based on the analysis from the customer satisfaction, but also the market, you can have some inputs about the difficulties to act on this market versus this one, and then the context that you can have around, for example, the cost for a CE mark or for an FDA clearance, the certification that you need for one market and the other. This kind of thing can drive and help to the CEO to identify the cost that it can have, the project that you will need for that, and possibly it will influence the strategy by leading this market first before another, and then help for the decision.
Thank you, Faisal. Okay, so very interesting question next as well. Have you ever had to unlearn something from a previous company in order to lead effectively in a startup? So have you ever had to unlearn something? It reminds me of my piano teacher. I had a really, really old piano teacher. She was in her 90s when I was little, and I learned classical piano, and she taught me, she said, first you have to learn, and then you have to unlearn to truly play. So it reminds me of that. So does anyone have an answer? What have you had to unlearn from an earlier company in order to be an effective leader in a startup? Ian.
You're trapped.
I suppose I've been quite lucky, actually, because I've most of what I've done has actually allowed me, it has helped me in in later life. I've probably the challenging learning experience I had when I was going way back when I was working at Depew. I started doing validation protocols, and my boss at the time was a guy called Coldover, and I took them to him, and he ripped them to pieces. And I'd walk back across the car park completely and utterly dejected. And he did this for 9 months. So it was absolutely soul destroying. And then one day I took it in, he looked at it and he just signed it. And I said, "What, you're not going to rip it to pieces?" And he said, "No, you know what you're doing now." So so yeah, but nothing I've really had to unlearn, and really kind of, my experiences have kind of generally kind of helped me as I've moved through. So yeah.
I'm going to open that up to anyone else. Has anyone else had to unlearn something that they've learned in another company in order to apply it in a startup?
Yes, for example, I come from scientific. I work in physics and so on. And going in biotech, I must not act as a scientist, but as a manager. And sometimes it's difficult. I would like to understand everything and so on, and then I continue to learn new things in the scientific domain. And this is not my job now. So I just need to understand the minimum to be able to discuss with investors, to discuss with shareholders and so on, and also to sell. And when you sell your product, it's more simple to explain than all the science that is behind. So in a way, I must unlearn part of science, not to complicate explanation to the people I am in contact with to raise fund or to sell.
Thank you, Claude, for that. I can add to that as well in terms of like what I've seen from different people that I know have made the moves. And I think one thing that strikes me is being able to move forwards without having all the information. So in larger companies, you have the luxury of time and various different departments and being able to be completely sure before you take a decision or make a recommendation on moving forwards. In startups, it's not like that. So in startups, oftentimes you don't have all the information and you don't have the luxury of waiting to get all the information. And so you have to get comfortable with making decisions with limited information or making recommendations with just the best information that you have at that time. And so moving away from being 100% perfect and ticking all the boxes and moving more towards that kind of like agile gray zone and being comfortable in that, that's something that I see often in people that make the moves across into startups. And then we do have actually a question, which is, what advice would you give to someone considering a move from a large corporation into a startup leadership role? And this came up earlier, and Ian, I know you said make sure that they know what they're getting into, but let's unpack that a little bit more and go a little bit deeper. What advice would you give to someone considering a move from a large corporation into a startup? Ian, let's start with you, just to put you on the spot again.
Think again.
More fun, more responsibilities.
Wow, that's a good question.
I'll give you a minute to think. Because I know that Faisal's got something to say.
I'll come back to you.
It was my case. So I moved from a large company, around 5,000 employees, to a startup, 100 employees. So what is interesting in this move, and not a term on advice, is first you will take more responsibility, and then you have to come with more confidence in your work and your decision. So when you join a company with this kind of responsibility, you have a real impact, and then it gives you more confidence in your work. But at the end, you have to also understand that by working in a smaller company, you will have possibly more ideas to find to improve the system with less money, I would say, but with more new opportunities of improvement. And you have to not unlearn, but put in place some new tips and think differently to help all your stakeholders to move forward, to take the right decision with, as you said, less information sometimes, with higher risk and with less tools, but with a great vision, because by joining a startup, it means that you are working with a niche or small specific product, which is very interesting in your career or in the job opportunities, than to be in the big company with a lot of with a very few projects which are very used for a long-term period, as you said, with milestones are quite big, and then it's sometimes the way that you change for smaller companies to move faster and to work with more valuable tasks on a day-to-day basis than in a big company.
Thanks, Faisal.
I have thought
an example, for example, we had clinical trials that failed totally, and it was a disaster in the company. So the solution has been found with a general meeting. There is a big problem. Does anybody has an idea to solve and to find a new solution to what we have made? And this is extremely exciting. And of course, people involved in the startup, they will find a solution. They find anyway, and it has been solved the same day once we had the result of the clinical trial that failed. And that's something with enthusiasm, with you are very strongly responsible, everybody, and they participate to major decisions like that. We can reorient work to find another solution to the problem where the first solution. When you make a mistake, you have the possibility to react rapidly and to find another solution. And it's by far more difficult in a big company.
Thanks for that,
Very
Claude. And Ian?
advice. Yes. Do not bring a big company mentality into a small company. That's really important, because you will, if you want to really annoy people in a small company, you'll tell them exactly how it was done in Thermo or J&J, you know, and that, bringing that in, people, they don't want to know about that, you know. And if you keep harking on about that, you'll just really turn people off. So just come in and be humble and just listen to what people are doing, rather than bringing that huge, you know, that big company mentality into the business.
Thank you, Ian. Really good point. So there's another, there's the next, more of a comment, but I really want to address it, from Cedric, that says, why are there no women in the startup CEO panel? Is it a reflection of the various difficulties encountered by women to reach top positions in the industry? So I can assure you that I am a woman, just to let you all know, in case you
Question
didn't.
is for you.
But I do recognise the point, Cedric, and we did actually have a woman confirmed, an additional panelist confirmed, who unfortunately dropped out. I don't know if it speaks to the difficulties for women to reach top leadership positions. Actually, Elemed has done a gender report. We released it last year, where we actually showed the split between women versus men at different seniority levels by company size. So I'll make sure that that's in the follow-up if we can't drop it in the chat, just to give you an idea of gender distribution. But if anyone here is, you know, listening, I'm always looking for really good participants for future leaders. And sometimes I do find that women are not always wanting to be spotlighted on a Zoom call with hundreds of people listening. So if you know any amazing leaders, not just because they're women, but if they're amazing leaders and you think that they should be on this episode or any of the future episodes, DM me on LinkedIn and tell me about them, and I will personally reach out to them, because it's the first time that we haven't had a fully balanced panel. So Cedric, I recognise your point and thank you for making it. Moving on, Becky says, at Claude, like you, I love to learn and know all the details about everything. How do you quash this impulse so you're not slowing the business down? Shall I read it again, Claude?
Yes.
Yes. So Becky said, like you, I love to learn and know all the details about everything. How do you quash this impulse enough so that you don't slow the business down?
For me, it's clearly the only solution is to involve everybody in the company, or whatever happens. We must share the difficulty. We must share everything. And this is, you don't have the complete knowledge on everything, and this is a way to everybody join together to solve the problem. I think it's very simple.
Thank you. So there's another really interesting question that I want to throw out there, which is, what's something you wish you'd known before taking on a leadership role in a startup? I'm gonna put that to everyone. Because I'm really interested in all of your learnings and what you wish you knew that you now know, because that's really good advice for anyone that's thinking about it. So I'll give you a second to all have a little think. And then who's going to start? Claude?
First time I was trying to raise funds, it was very difficult. I had no idea how to do that. It was obvious that what we were doing was very fantastic, scientifically perfect at the top and so on. But no idea, for example, what is a market study. And this is important to convince shareholder, of course, an investor, and things like that. There's plenty of things you don't know. It's more easy to manage a group of people that you have chosen and that are better than you in various domains, and you don't have to be afraid to recruit people that are better than you, I would say, or something like that, or who knows more things than you. This is in reality a very good thing. But what I knew was this difficulty to raise fund and to explain to investor what they need what I need to tell them to convince them to invest in the company, and plenty of points. I was not ready for that. I was too scientist, too scientific.
Thank you, Claude. Let's go to Alex. We haven't heard from Alex in a while.
Yeah, I would say what I would bring, based upon my experience with my first company, that you don't need to raise too early, because it's dilute your shares. And the second one, we've done that really costly pivot after the first raise, and it costed us a lot. But when we found the right product market fit, it went much smoother. So I would advise not to raise investment too early. And the second one, I would say that when you're working on something specific regarding your device or your technology that you'd like to bring on the market, you'd like to minimize the level of features that you bring to the market on the first iteration, so you can do the much smoother pivot if you would need to do this. So that's from my side.
Thanks, Alex. Faisal?
From my side, I will take more information. I will keep more information about the position itself, in fact, because during recruitment, yes, you have to understand what is the goal of the company, what are the products they are building, but you don't really know the market expectations, and except if you are recruited for marketing or for sale. But for more support activities, what is important to know is the stakeholders that you will interact, your position in the company, who will be the first partner, and who will be the people that you will deal with on a day-to-day basis. And even if it's not easy to know for a startup company, there is also the vision that you can have in this company for the next 2 or 3 years. Because building a product is something hard, and then you have to do it within the team. So you come also with a vision and where the company wants to go in the 2 or 3 next years, and how you can contribute to that. And this way you can understand more your role in the company, your interfaces, and then I will not be more selective in the choice of the company, but also to be more rapidly active and a participant in the growth of the company.
Thanks, Faisal. And finally, let's go over to Ian for your feedback.
I think one of the things that you probably don't, certainly I'm talking specifically for being, the lead in a quality and regulatory role in a small company. Sometimes one of the things I think you don't necessarily realize is exactly what you're going to potentially have to face, because at the end of the day, when you operate in medical devices, sometimes it does go wrong. When I work for a company called Rainier Technology, some people may know it. Unfortunately, the clinical trial failed, and we couldn't ring fence the clinical product from that was on the market. So, you get to a point where you have to have an extremely difficult discussion with the CEO. There was no, it wasn't that the CEO was, he understood what was happening, but sometimes you're having an existential discussion about the future of the business, and that is actually how it happened. And I think I don't know, you imagine how you're going to be able to cope with that when you go into a startup, but actually having to experience it and go through it you come out a different person. You come out a lot stronger. It's but again, it comes down to, you've got to put the patient, the customer, the patient at the center of every decision that you ever make. And that's got to come above money or anything else. It's always got to be patient centric. And I think if you do that, ultimately in a QARA role, you're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Ian. And on that note, that is bringing us to the end of the Q&A, live Q&A session. So round of applause for you all. That was really, you were in the hot seat there, blasting through as many questions as we could. And to those of you that have joined us on LinkedIn or in the Zoom room, thank you so much. But before I let you all go, I really want to know, and this is something that I know the panel always like to know, what did you take away from today's session? Open up your Slido and in the chat, just take a couple of seconds to let us know what was your biggest learning. What are you taking away from today's session? You should be seeing a poll launch in the Slido any moment now. So let's see what people have to say.
That's a different panel.
We've got resilience is a word that's come up. Courage is another word that's come up. I think people are typing. Just give us words, guys. We don't need long, detailed sentences. Inspiring. I'll take that. Team. Nobody write on here, Eleanor is definitely a woman, please. I hope you've taken away something more than that. Less ego, more empathy. I really, really like that. Some really, really good things there that our audience have taken away. So I would also like to know then, are you going to be attending the next session? I'm going to give you more details on the next session, but for as long as people are attending these, we will keep running them. And we do these sessions for you, for the community. So we want you to take as much value as possible from the Future Leader series that we're doing. But so far, 100% yes. Is all I can see on my screen. So we still have 100% conversion. So really, really good on that. So something that I announced on the last Future Leader sessions was that Elemed is working on a suite of assessments to help you benchmark your level. And communication is something that we've been talking a lot about. It was one of the themes that came up in the conversation even today around one of the essential skills you need to have in order to be successful in your role. The question is, how effective are you actually at doing it? We're building a skills assessment that you're going to be able to access, but we haven't built it yet. So if you want free access to the skills assessment, scan this QR code and just fill out your details so that we can send that to you first as soon as it goes live and before we start all the promo. You can be one of our beta access people. So please scan that to join the waitlist and get a free communication skills assessment and discover your personal score in effective communication. And what else can I share with you guys? The next session. So the next session is really timely because it's going to be in September and we're going to be talking about starting strong and leading in a new job. September is oftentimes when people start new roles after the summer, they come back from holiday, or even if you're thinking about making a move or you're in a new job, you've been there a few months, but after that summer break, it's about how do you start strong in September and how do you lead in a new job. So please register for the next session of Future Leaders. That's on the 11th of September after the summer period, and follow us on LinkedIn to find out who is going to be on our panel. And finally, a big thank you to our panel and to all the audience for joining, and I will see you on the next episode of Future Leaders on the 11th of September. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evenings. Goodbye.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Bye.